The banquet hall was filled with polished suits, flashing cameras, and the soft hum of conversations in different languages. It was one of those high-profile evenings where powerful people gathered to sign deals that could change industries overnight. At the center of it all was the CEO, a man known not only for his wealth but for his fiery temper. Everything had been carefully arranged. Every seat, every word, every handshake, until a sudden moment of confusion stopped the room cold. The CEO had invited a group of German investors, people whose decision could either secure his company's future or crush it completely. But as they spoke, their voices quick and sharp in German, no one at the table understood a single word. The translators weren't there yet. The executives exchanged nervous glances, and the pressure in the room grew heavy. The investors frowned, their patience thinning, and the CEO's face began to harden. He slammed his hand lightly on the table, his tone sharp as he demanded an answer. But still silence lingered. No one dared to speak. For a man used to control, the CEO felt the ground slipping beneath him. Every second of silence was an insult, every missed word a potential disaster. His voice rose, frustration boiling over, and the once celebratory dinner turned into an awkward standstill. The tension was so thick that even the waiters moving around with trays of food slowed down, unsure of what to do. Guests looked down at their plates, hoping not to be noticed. It seemed the evening was about to collapse, all because of a language barrier. And then, out of nowhere, a soft but steady voice cut through the chaos. It didn't come from a translator or a polished executive. It came from the waitress who had been quietly serving water at the corner of the table. Everyone turned, shocked that she had spoken. Her words were clear, fluent, and in perfect German. The investors froze mid-sentence, their eyes widening in disbelief, while the CEO's expression shifted from fury to something closer to stunned silence. In that instant, the entire room realized the balance of power had just changed. A simple waitress had stepped into a storm where even the most powerful men had failed. But what she said next left the room speechless, and the CEO realized the evening would never go as planned. The room fell into a silence so deep that even the sound of glasses clinking seemed to vanish. All eyes were locked on the waitress, a young woman in a simple uniform who looked completely out of place among the billion-dollar executives and foreign investors. She hadn't raised her voice, but the confidence in her tone carried through the air as if she belonged at the table. The German investors leaned forward, whispering to each other with surprised smiles, while the CEO shifted uncomfortably in his chair. No one had expected her to understand, let alone speak, their language. Her name tag read Anna, and though she looked calm on the outside, her heart was pounding. She had worked at the hotel for less than 6 months, keeping her head down, pouring drinks, and disappearing into the background. No one in the company had ever asked about her past, nor did they know that she had studied abroad and spent years in Germany before circumstances forced her back home. Tonight, she had only come in for an extra shift to make ends meet. She never imagined she'd be standing in the middle of a business crisis that could change the fate of a corporation. The CEO, known for his short temper and need for control, stared at Anna like she had just stepped into forbidden territory. He wasn't used to being caught off guard, and for a moment, his pride seemed to outweigh his curiosity. Still, he didn't stop her. The investors were now waiting, their eyes flicking between him and the waitress. The entire deal hung by a thread, and the only person who seemed able to keep it from snapping was the woman holding an empty tray in her hands. Anna continued translating, her voice steady, her German flawless. Every sentence she relayed seemed to bring a little more life back into the meeting. The investors nodded, their tones softening as they finally felt understood. But while they seemed pleased, the CEO's jaw tightened. This wasn't how he wanted the evening to unfold. He had planned to showcase his power, not be rescued by a waitress. And yet, without her, the night might already have ended in disaster. What unsettled the room most was not just that she spoke German, it was how she spoke. The investors reacted as if her words carried a familiarity, as though they recognized something deeper in her accent or choice of phrases. A strange look passed between them, leaving even more questions hanging in the air. Who exactly was this waitress? And why did she seem to know more than anyone expected? The tension in the hall only deepened as Anna kept speaking. Every word she translated revealed more than just business terms. It carried layers of meaning, hints of hesitation, and fragments of emotion that no one else had picked up on. The investors leaned in, their posture softening as if they finally felt they were being heard for the first time that evening. Yet the CEO, sitting stiff at the head of the table, grew more restless. He wasn't used to being sidelined in his own meeting, and the fact that a waitress now controlled the conversation unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. Behind the polished smiles, the conflict was clear. The German investors weren't just here to discuss numbers. Their tone hinted at concerns about trust, loyalty, and hidden agendas. They mentioned terms that had not been included in the official documents, phrases that spoke of conditions quietly left out of the contract. Anna hesitated at first, wondering if she should translate everything word for word, but her conscience wouldn't allow her to cut corners. She delivered each line carefully, even the parts that seemed to cast doubt on the CEO's plans. Her honesty added weight to the room, and with every sentence, she sensed the CEO's glare growing sharper. Meanwhile, among the staff in the background, whispers began to spread. Some waiters peeked from the side doors, curious about the young woman suddenly standing at the center of so much power. They had always known Anna as quiet, polite, and hardworking, but tonight she looked like someone entirely different. The managers exchanged worried glances too. If the CEO grew furious, it wouldn't just be Anna who paid the price, but the hotel itself. For the investors, though, this was turning into something more than a negotiation. They weren't just interested in the CEO anymore. They were now studying Anna, listening closely not only to her words but to the way she carried herself. At one point, one of the German executives smiled faintly, as though he recognized her. Anna noticed, but she quickly looked away, her throat tightening. She had hoped no one here would remember her from her past life, but the possibility was suddenly impossible to ignore. The CEO's fury masked something else, a growing fear that he was losing control of both the deal and the narrative. He clenched his fists under the table, wondering how a woman he had barely noticed could undo months of planning in a single evening. The night was no longer about contracts or figures. It had become a battle of truth, pride, and hidden connections, and Anna was standing right in the center of it all. The air in the banquet hall grew heavier with every passing second. The chandelier's glow seemed almost too bright, casting sharp shadows across the table as if the room itself was holding its breath. Anna continued to translate, but now each word carried an edge, pulling the hidden truths of the investors into the open. The executives around the table shifted uncomfortably, realizing this was no longer just about numbers. It was about secrets that could change everything. The CEO's patience thinned to a breaking point. His jaw clenched as he drummed his fingers against the polished wood of the table, his fury disguised as a cold smile. To the investors, he pretended to remain calm, but his eyes kept darting toward Anna, as though he were trying to silence her with his stare alone. But Anna didn't stop. She spoke with a quiet conviction, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around her. Each sentence revealed more contradictions between what the CEO had promised and what the investors had been led to expect. A hush swept through the hall when one of the German executives finally leaned forward and asked Anna directly, in their language, a question that was not part of the formal discussion. The others listened intently, their faces unreadable. Anna froze for a moment, her fingers tightening around the tray she still held. She understood the question, but she also knew that answering it truthfully could turn the entire evening upside down. The CEO's glare burned into her, warning her not to speak. Yet the investors waited, their trust now placed entirely in her words. The staff watching from the sidelines sensed something dangerous unfolding. A few waiters exchanged nervous glances, and one of the managers discreetly tried to signal Anna to step back. But it was too late, she was already in too deep. The investors' focus was locked on her, and the CEO's power seemed to be slipping further away with every tick of the clock. The tension reached a breaking point when one of the investors placed his pen firmly on the table and said something that made Anna's chest tighten. His words were sharp, almost accusatory, and his gaze lingered on her as if he suspected she knew more than she had revealed. The CEO shifted in his seat, his voice rising as he demanded to know what had been said. The room fell into silence again, waiting for Anna to translate. In that moment, Anna realized the entire deal, the CEO's reputation, and perhaps even her own future balanced on what she chose to say next. The weight of 100 eyes pressed against her, and the suspense in the room felt like it could shatter at any second. Anna's breath caught as every eye in the room fixed on her. The investor's sharp words echoed in her mind, and though she wanted to remain calm, she could feel her pulse racing. She knew the translation would not only expose what was being questioned but also shift the balance of the entire evening. With the CEO glaring, waiting for her to speak, Anna steadied herself and gave the translation. The investors weren't simply negotiating. They were demanding to know about hidden dealings the CEO had never revealed. Gasps rippled through the room. The executives at the table looked at one another in disbelief, while the CEO's face flushed with anger. His hand slammed against the table, rattling glasses, as he snapped that this was a lie. But before anyone could react, one of the German investors pulled out a folder and slid it across the polished surface. The papers inside weren't part of the official agreement. They were proof of side deals, contracts, and clauses that contradicted everything the CEO had claimed. The room erupted into whispers. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing they had been kept in the dark. Others leaned closer to get a glimpse of the documents. The CEO's voice boomed, denying everything, accusing the investors of twisting the truth. Yet the folder lay open on the table, undeniable and damning. The spotlight wasn't just on him anymore. It was also on Anna. The investors turned back to her, asking again in German if she knew about these hidden contracts. The question stunned her. How could they think she knew anything about secret business deals? But the way they looked at her made her realize something chilling. They didn't just see her as a waitress anymore. They recognized her. The faint smile from earlier returned on one of the investors' faces. He muttered something under his breath, and Anna's stomach dropped. They remembered her from her time abroad, from a place she had tried to leave behind. The suspicion in their eyes wasn't about her ability to translate. It was about whether she was connected to the very documents sitting on the table. The CEO's fury turned to suspicion as well. His gaze, sharp and cold, locked on Anna as though she had betrayed him before the night had even ended. The staff whispered nervously from the sidelines, unsure of what they were witnessing. The once celebratory evening had spiraled into chaos, and now a second storm was brewing, one that tied Anna to a past she had never wanted uncovered. The stakes had just doubled, and the entire room waited for her next move. The silence in the banquet hall felt unbearable as Anna stood frozen, every gaze pressing against her. The folder on the table seemed to burn with weight, its pages filled with secrets powerful enough to ruin reputations and collapse fortunes. The CEO's voice thundered through the room, accusing her of conspiring with the investors. His words dripped with fury, but beneath the anger was something else, fear. For the first time that night, the mask of control had slipped, and everyone could see it. Anna drew in a deep breath. She had not asked for this moment, but it had found her all the same. With steady hands, she placed her tray down and faced the room. Her voice was calm, but it carried more strength than any outburst could. She explained in German and then in English, making sure everyone in the hall understood, that she had no connection to the hidden contracts. But she also made it clear that truth mattered more than pride or power. If lies had been buried in the deal, they deserved to come into the light, no matter who was exposed. The investors nodded, their eyes sharp but approving. They had seen what they needed: honesty. The executives shifted uncomfortably, realizing the man they had followed might not have been as transparent as they believed. The CEO tried to cut her off, shouting that she was just a waitress, that her words meant nothing. But that only made the room turn further against him. For the first time, it wasn't his voice commanding the evening. It was hers. The climax came when one of the investors slid another document across the table, this one stamped and signed. It revealed that they had known about the CEO's hidden dealings all along. What they truly wanted was to test the integrity of the people in the room. The CEO failed. Anna unexpectedly had passed. The investors announced they would continue negotiations, but not under his leadership. They wanted a new representative, someone they could trust. The hall erupted in shock. The CEO staggered back, his empire slipping through his fingers in front of his own team. His furious gaze fell on Anna, but this time his anger held no power. The investors' attention was now firmly on her, praising her courage and fluency. She had walked into the room as a server and walked out as the voice of truth. But just as the crowd began to settle, one final twist cut through the air. One of the investors leaned closer to Anna, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You remind me of your father," he whispered. Her heart stopped. She had never spoken of him. Not here, not anywhere. And in that moment, she realized this night wasn't just about exposing the CEO. It was about uncovering a past she thought she had buried forever. Anna's breath caught as the investor's whisper echoed in her mind. She had not expected anyone in that glittering room to know her past, let alone her father's name. For years she had worked quietly, blending into the background, carrying trays and avoiding attention. But now, in the span of one night, everything had shifted. The CEO had fallen, his fury collapsing under the weight of exposed lies, and the investors had turned their focus to her. Yet that single whisper reminded her that no matter how far she had tried to run, the past had a way of finding its way back. The investors, however, did not press further. They respected the silence in her eyes and returned to the business at hand. They announced that the deal would move forward, but only under new terms of honesty and accountability. The executives at the table nodded, some reluctantly, others with relief, as they realized a new chapter was beginning. The CEO stormed out, his footsteps echoing like thunder down the hall, leaving behind the empire he once controlled. When the meeting finally ended, the room slowly returned to its usual hum, though nothing felt ordinary anymore. Anna gathered her tray, ready to disappear once again into the quiet corners of her life. But before she could leave, one of the investors stood and offered her a hand, thanking her not just for translating, but for standing firm in truth when others chose silence. A few of the executives joined in, their voices softer now, acknowledging the strength she had shown. It was a strange moment, respect given not to power or position, but to courage. Outside, the night air was cool, the city alive with its usual rhythm. Anna paused on the steps, breathing deeply. She had no intention of becoming part of the corporate world or chasing wealth. She only wanted to return to her simple life, to the quiet dignity of work done with honesty. Yet she knew she could never forget what had happened inside that hall. The story ended not with riches or titles, but with a reminder that truth has its own power. Even in a room filled with billionaires and CEOs, a single voice, calm, honest, and unshaken, could change the course of everything. Anna walked away knowing she had stood her ground. And though the past had brushed against her once more, she carried forward a new strength, the knowledge that even the smallest person could hold the key to the biggest change.